Is it recording?
Yes, it is recording.
All right, here we are on The Blind Man in Black, and here we are with deprofessionalized intellectual activist, author, and my dear friend Gustavo Esteva. Thank you so much for being here, Gustavo.
Thank you, Brian, for inviting me to these very delightful conversations.
And it's always delightful. And I want to start out by just kind of setting the framework. We've had three discussions so far on the podcast, and this is a kind of continuation of that. And we attempted to have one last week, but we got into a discussion about COVID, and I felt like there was a misunderstanding, and it was. I feel like we can kind of discuss it now, and you can discuss how you're feeling, and I can discuss how I'm feeling, and we can go from there because COVID is so well, it's a pandemic and it's affecting all of our lives adversely in one form or another. And so I'm just going to tell you, Gustavo, this is kind of where I'm at. I'm very scared. I really don't know what to believe. And, I'm trying to find a way forward. I'm hearing every day through the work that I do, I hear a lot of misery, a lot of people that are suffering, and it's hard to find the truth. And I don't trust the economic elite, politicians, or pharmaceutical companies. I don't trust any of them. But people are dying. I have friends that I know who have contracted COVID. I talk to people every day who've had they say that there's 10% of people that get COVID who are permanently disabled in one form or another. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day that is in that category. And so, I feel like it's so hard, to find unity in this, and how to proceed together as a community, as a society. And I'll just give you an example. Like in my community in Nevada County, it's very divided. And there are people that are very adamant about wearing masks, and it makes sense to me to wear a mask and practice social distancing. And then there's another group of individuals, both on the right and left, that don't believe in wearing masks and that we should open up. And I just don't know what to do because, I mean, if everybody was wearing mask and it wasn't working, we could go, all right, it's not working, we have to do something else. But people aren't even sticking to the guidelines that we have. So, and more people are getting sick. And in October, when Halloween rolled around, we were so close to being out of this. We were we have a tier system here for each county, and we were in the yellow tier, which meant that everything was almost open. We still had to wear masks, but everybody could go shopping, and even movie theaters were open at limited capacity. And then Halloween happened, and then people started getting together, not wearing masks, and it exploded. And then the holidays, Thanksgiving, and so on. And a lot of it points to not wearing masks and not practicing social distancing. And that's where I'm at. But I'm willing to, explore different possibilities. And I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a doctor. So I don't feel that I can speak intelligently about this. And frankly, I'm exhausted and have no fucking idea what to do, except I want to be able to cling on to something and say this is the path forward, but I have no fucking idea what that is. But and at this point I'm like, well, why don't we at least try the mask and the social distancing? But the problem is not everybody's following the fucking rules. So how do we know it's going to even work? So that's where I'm at, and I'd like you to present. I know you have an alternative um, um, path, and I'd love for you to describe it because I deeply respect you and love you very much, and I want to hear how you're dealing with this uh, era of COVID-19 and how you are adapting and confronting it.
Great, Brian. I would love to have this discussion, knowing exactly where we are talking about this now. Um, we can say immediately react saying, oh, we know very well what is COVID. Almost half of the people of Nitierra has had COVID now.
Mhm.
And we have in that almost the whole spectrum of possibilities, meaning people without symptoms, no symptoms at all, people with a light gripa, people with a very serious gripa, and people with very, very serious symptoms and expressions of the disease. And then we have COVID near us. It is not a distant phenomenon, but it's something that we have been experiencing. And then we have been discussing this, and we are working with hundreds of communities involved in the same process, doing many different kind of things to deal with this. And then we know. And the first thing that I would like to say, Brian, is COVID produced an increasing polarization of the people. And it is one of the pretexts are COVID. One of the pretexts, one of the elements is some people thinks one position about COVID, and the other people have the other position. There are many, many important differences about what to do about COVID. But this is just one expression of the polarization. Um, it is particularly evident in the case of the US that you have many millions that are in a position that is violent, racist, sexist, that is very, very pretty aggressive. What was that many of us experienced in the past was systematically denied in the US and hidden for many people, and now it's entirely evident. And what happened in Washington in January 6th is just an example of this expression of people that are ready to use their weapons and to do terrible things um, because of certain conviction about what to do, what should be done. And it is not only people following Trump. Yes, there are many people following Trump and adoring him and assuming that he is the great leader, but it is not only that. It is a very profound, a very deep position in the US that confront one section of America with the other section. And one of the things that we need to discuss today is how to deal with this polarization. And sometimes this polarization implies that friends of us, people that we considered our brothers in the struggle, are now in the other side. And we need to learn how to deal with this, not to fall in the same kind of behavior, attack and aggression and violence and all these kind of things. Um, it is next to impossible to conceive how to talk with the people that attacked the Capitolium last Tuesday. How to talk with them? It is next to impossible. It's very difficult. But this is the kind of things that we need to talk about. And we can start with COVID, that it is not so complex.
Well, the other thing that I think about is that everybody is so adamant about their position of I'm right, you're wrong, and people are coming from that place of that judgment. And I keep thinking about what Marshall Rosenberg, the psychologist, says: nobody wins in the I'm right, you're wrong game.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is not. Now, there is one way of walking into the dialogue is let's find some elements of agreement. And then, for example, we can share immediately one specific point. We assume, both you and me, that this is a very serious thing, that this is a real threat, that the virus exists, and that it's a very contagious virus, and that can be a real threat for particularly for some people. I will say immediately that Nicole and I are a part of that specific group that we can see in danger. I am 84, she is 82. Both of us have health problems. My hepatitis plays against me clearly, and she has other problems, health problems. And then we can be, we are classified as the people that are almost doomed with COVID, that we can die with COVID. It is very clear that we are in that situation. Then we are acknowledging, both of us, that this is a very serious thing. So then we need to do something. We need to deal with this specific threat. I think this is a good point of departure. In full agreement, both of us. Now, we begin to disagree when we discuss what to do. And here I would like to start mentioning one very well-known example that people mention from time to time to discuss this, that is Vietnam. Here you have a country of almost 100 million inhabitants that has had, next to China, that has had until now 32 deaths. That is nothing. Very few deaths. One important point, no lockdown, not official lockdown, not imposed lockdown, and not voluntary lockdown. In Vietnam, there was no lockdown at all. You have lockdown in China, and against the propaganda and the discussion, it was not imposed. And the government of China told the people the question, and the people of China that has a lot of discipline, and the government has a lot of control. It's a very authoritarian government. The people was voluntarily in lockdown. But in Vietnam, that was not the case. There was no. And then what is the public policy? What is the policies of Vietnam? What we can learn from the policies in Vietnam? One very, very important point, Brian, for me is the most important point. The first thing that the government of Vietnam did at the very beginning, they were some of the first with information next to China. And then they felt the threat immediately, very close to them. And they were not in an island like New Zealand. They were very, very open to all the people. Then the first thing that they did was to acknowledge the problem publicly, to close themselves, meaning all the points of entry to Vietnam were closed, in a sense, not forbidding the entry, but accepting people coming from outside with very strict rules, like quarantine. Any people coming from outside was checked and put in quarantine and observed over a lot of time. And a very important point, they have a very, very good system to follow up. Then any person coming from outside was not only checked to see if they had or not COVID, but also to follow the person and to see all the contacts of the person. Then if the person was suddenly declared with COVID, then they were able immediately to check all the people that had been in contact with that specific person. That was a very, very effective system of follow-up. The next thing that defined the position of Vietnam is magnificent information to the people. This is some of the best informations provided to the people. Then there was a very, very solid collection of data, what we know about COVID, what it is, what is the dangers, what we know about what to do before COVID. One example is they produced a kind of a kind of little program with music, a very contagious music, and the people were singing COVID in Vietnam because they disseminated this as a massive propaganda. But it was not propaganda forcing you to do something, but giving you information for you to decide what to do. And that was something that I think, in my view, that no other country did something similar.
And what was that information?
Information about what we know about viruses, what is the virus. Brian, in the US, there has not been, in spite of the massive propaganda, of the massive storm of information you have had, people don't know exactly what is the virus. There is a lot of discussion about the virus, about what it is, how we live with the virus, etc. But there is knowledge, serious knowledge about what the virus is, how we live with viruses, how we deal with viruses, what is the reaction of the body before virus, etc. How we know if the virus is around or not, how we resist, etc. Then this was previous knowledge, previous to COVID. And then they disseminated knowledge about what the virus is and how to deal with the virus. Then all the knowledge they had at that time, and they improved that information in time and disseminated information, more information about COVID specifically. How this was a very, very contagious virus, and how it affected the people, and which are the consequences of the people, with a very important point, to give the information as we had in February of last year, and as we have now, that for 80% of the people, the virus does not represent any problem. That if they are infected, and I will say, we can discuss this later, this is a case-demic, not a pandemic, meaning this is a massive production of cases, but the cases does not meet any problem. For most people with a case, they don't have any problem. They have no symptoms and no problems of any kind. They just have the virus, and the virus does not produce anything in them, anything. Not any symptom, not any kind of, not a headache, nothing.
But
That is,
there are situations like, I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine, and he has a friend, and the friend is a woman, and her husband is around my age, in his 40s, and he died of it. And he was very athletic, and he it didn't look like he would be affected by it in any way whatsoever. I mean, he didn't have any underlying health issues, and he died.
then we can discuss the question of deaths. But the first point that we need to consider is that in any case, 80% of the people are not affected in any possible way. Then you have 10 to 15% of the people that are affected, and they have a very serious cold, gripe, or whatever, with some symptoms that may be even severe, but it's just a gripe, and that's it. No problem, no respiratory problems, nothing serious really. It is something to put you in bed for 2 or 3 days, something to feel bad, something that implies losing your smell, some symptoms, strange symptoms, and you feel not okay. You may have headaches, you may have these kind of things. And then 15% of the people in that condition, and then they recover after 2, 3, 4 days, 8 days, and that's it. And later they say in many cases that you can have consequences after. For these people, for these 15%, they had the problem 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and nothing happened later. Meaning that for more than 90% of the people on Earth, the virus does not represent anything, any danger, any specific danger. And then we need to discuss the deaths. Then we need to discuss why something like 5% of the people on Earth have suffered very serious illnesses, very, very serious, and some of them died. I am using the expression some of them because still the percentage is very low. Let me tell you something that is very serious, and then we have the figures if you want, very serious figures. Twice as many people have died because of the lockdown than because of the virus. Meaning, because of the lockdown, people committing suicide, many people, many different reasons why the lockdown produces death. And this, according with the accounting, that is, of course, you can discuss the accounting. You can discuss the accounting of the deaths of COVID, the deaths attributed to COVID. We have a very solid discussion about that. And that we really don't know who died because of the virus and who did not. Because the main argument that we have by many very respectable people is there are people that died with COVID, not because of COVID. That apparently most, if not all, of the deaths attributed to COVID was not because of COVID, but it was because of the condition of these people. But let me finish my story of Vietnam.
Okay.
They have this massive information, all the information we have, that is a lot of information, and they have improved and actualized the information during the whole year. Then the first point is that the people in Vietnam has perhaps the best information about COVID in the world as a nation. And the next point is Vietnam is a capitalist country playing the game of capitalism fully in the society, but they still have some elements of socialism. And those elements of socialism implying to have a very pretty solid system of health system, and the decision to provide healthcare to anyone in problems without any economic consequence for them.
It's like a universal healthcare system.
Yes, yes. And then people felt sure that if they had any problem, they will have health support. And apparently the people, the health system in Vietnam was pretty effective in reacting immediately before any symptom and do the pertinent things. And that was why they have very few cases, of very serious cases. To explain the situation of Vietnam and some other countries, let me something that looks like a counter-argument. Apparently, in the case of Vietnam and other countries in Asia, they had many, many cases. of the previous virus, of the first epidemic of SARS and the other viruses that we had in the last 10 years. And then some people are saying that perhaps in these countries, they had something that is today described as herd immunity about this class of viruses. And that is one of the reasons why the people in Vietnam reacted in that way, that they have immunity, more immunity that we had, because for us, for most of us, this virus is totally new. And for them, they knew the family. And then their bodies had already accumulated resistance to that virus. That is another element that we don't share with them. And one very important point is that people behaved responsible by themselves because they knew the importance of doing it. And that means that most people accepted some precautions in the street, in the interaction between them. They had still a lot of interaction, but they were trying to avoid physical contact. They used masks with limitations, meaning not imposed masks, but many of them decided to use masks. Here, let me interrupt myself to discuss the question of the masks. I am using the mask when I am going to our conversations in Unitierra. I am using the masks when I am going to shopping. But I have heard a lot, I have read a lot, that a mask is basically useless as protection for the others or for yourself. You have this experience in Denmark, a very serious experience with a kind of scientific experiment, controlled experiment, in which they have thousands of people with masks and thousands of people without masks living their lives normally, with masks or without masks, and in the same city, in the same place. And the statistics about COVID was exactly the same for both groups, meaning no difference with the mask. And there are many, many arguments about the mask, saying that it is not real protection. One argument that the people in Vietnam knew was that if you use a lot of time the mask, that is problematic. That is weakening you because you are breathing your not good oxygen. You are breathing your own
Carbon
air.
dioxide.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Then what I am saying, this is my case. This is the case of Nicole. Yes, we go to a shop, we put the mask. We are in a conversation in Unitierra with other 10 people, and then we have the mask. It's not all the time. This is part of the time in specific conditions when we are going to interact with other people in a specific environment. And in the case of Unitierra, for example, we have a place that is not closed, that has a lot of air coming and going, that it is very, very, very open, meaning that it is not it's not closed, it's not concentration of the virus, but at the same time, it is opportunity for contagion, meaning it is one person with the virus, and then the virus can circulate around. And that is why we try to use the mask. And it is
Now, my understanding of the masks, though, masks are really to protect other people because specifically the cloth ones, unless you're wearing the N95, which is a medical mask, which protects the person wearing the mask and other people.
Yeah. Then we are, yes, using basically the one protecting others, not the surgical mask.
Right.
Yes, but trying to use that for some time only, not too much time. Trying to avoid permanent exposition of ourselves.
Hmm.
And this was apparently the same principle used in Vietnam. Distancing, yes, having some distance of the other people, having social distancing, but not stopping the interaction, not lockdown. And that means, and now about the dead, um, really we don't know, and we most probably will never know who died of what. But apparently, as far as we know, most people that died had very serious problems of health. And then one thing that also happened in Vietnam is that they took good care, very good care, the society and the government, of the people with health problems. And the peculiar thing about Vietnam, in contrast with the US or Mexico, is that in general the population had better health than all of us. Meaning the situation, the health situation of most people in Vietnam was clearly better in terms of health than us. Why? Because previously, before COVID, they were taking care of the diabetics. They were taking care of people with heart problems. They were taking care of the people that any decent society should do that. Take good care of the people in trouble. Uh, that should be the normal situation.
And
But
in
that,
the United States, you only get quality health care if you have money.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that you have millions of people suffering obesity and suffering diabetes and suffering a lot of things, a lot of different kind of things. Um, of course, more the poorer you are, more problems you have, because you have malnutrition and you are not eating well, you are eating a very toxic food, you are eating you are not in good condition and you don't have good health care. And that is, of course, more of the indigenous people, black people, Latinos are more affected by this before COVID. And then they are the more vulnerable people as a class, as a group of people. Um, and yes, you have in this society that the society is not taking care of them. And in many senses, it is quite the opposite. They are oppressing them as much as possible. And this is includes the people themselves and the government. This is the problem. When it's not only the structure of the society and it is capital, it is the corporations, but people themselves are discriminating, humiliating, oppressing the poor people. That is the problem. And then you can see that in most cases, perhaps in all cases, you have people that have previous health problems. And some of the cases of very healthy people, like your friend, that was an athlete, etc., when they explored more in the history of the guy, is that apparently he didn't know that he had a very serious health problem. But we don't know, Brian. The
I
truth,
certainly don't know.
that is the fact. We don't know.
So where, like the sources of your information, like if those that are watching and listening and they want to learn about some of the information that you've been talking about, where did you gather this information?
Look, it is true because we have in Unitierra one study group about this, that we started discussing this And we call it this rethinking the pandemic.
Okay.
And then
Hold on.
we,
Before you go on, I want to clarify something. So, for those of you listening and watching, Una Tierra is short for Universidad de la Tierra, which is an autonomous learning center in Oaxaca, which Gustavo co-founded.
yes. And then we have a very, very open, and then we started, and because of COVID, we adopted the virtual way in addition to the face-to-face way. And then our study group was open to people, and that was very fortunate because suddenly we had in our conversation a woman from Finland, another woman from Germany, a person from Peru and Brazil, and then we had a real conversation, a weekly conversation for months with people from all over the world, having, well, not all over the world, but a dozen countries of very different conditions, participating in the conversation and offering us many different sources of information. I got something like 10 different services that include services, not news, but basically articles. Of course, I have some services with news and some services with articles, some of them pretty good and very well known. Um, and then I read, not study, but read superficially thousands of articles on many different sources, many of them very serious sources. For example, I think that two very enlightened sources for me that I highly recommend is The Lancet, this very prestigious medical British journal. The Lancet has existed for many years, and they accept only as for publication only very serious and checked articles,
Peer reviewed.
peer-reviewed articles. Um, and they are the ones that started to talk about syndemic 10 years ago, saying that we are suffering in the world today. Syndemic meaning that a great proportion of the population had very serious problems, diabetes, obesity, all these kind of things. And this is a very serious problem everywhere. And then we need to deal with this syndemic, and they have been discussing how to do this. What is the kind of things that we need to do to deal with this syndemic? And of course, they actualized the information and their position when the virus came and when the discussion about the pandemic started to have. Then I have a lot of trust and respect for the Lancet. Another British journal that I have been following for more than 10 years is a journal that is called What Doctors Don't Tell You. Again, this is a journal that don't publish anything that does not have peer-reviewed base. They are very respectful of what we still call science, and then they respect. They don't publish anything that don't have very serious studies behind. In every time they publish an article, they have immediately like 10 or 20 references. This is the base of our information. We are synthesizing for you the information of these 5, 10, 20, 50 articles with scientific references and books, etc. And what they are saying, Brian, is a completely different picture. What doctors don't tell you, for me, it is, then let me give you an example. They have accumulated in the course of 20 years of existence an incredible amount of information about prostate problems. And I have a prostate problem. I have had it for more than 30 years. And of course, I was very interested in what they discovered. Um, just to make the long story short, something like 2 years ago, they published a very fascinating article saying, if you have prostate cancer what you need to do is nothing. Meaning you must not have surgery, and they present a lot of cases of bad outcome of a surgery. You don't need to have pills, you don't need to have antibiotics, you don't need to do almost anything. You can reduce the pain if you have pain. They have some simple, normal, very simple recommendations if you have prostate cancer, because it is a peculiar kind of cancer. They give you the full explanation. Then they provide very, very good information and that give you very sensible advice to live a decent, normal life. And to criticize the pharmaceutical companies, to criticize the official dogmas of the medical profession. They are trying to resist these dogmas. And they are, for me, a very trustable source. And it's very easy to consult. And of course, I have other sources like David Cayley and other very serious thinkers. Of course, I have been following with great attention Giorgio Agamben, the Italian philosopher, that has adopted a position. He has been very criticized in Italy and all over the world because of his position, criticizing basically the public policy. He does not have a recommendation. He's not telling you what to do. He's just saying this public policy is very dangerous. This is not the right thing to do. And they are using COVID for something else. He has been talking about this crisis before COVID. And now let me tell you something more that is part of this conversation, Brian. There are now very solid proofs that the consequences of the policy adopted is producing a lot more deaths than COVID. A lot more deaths, perhaps 10 times more deaths. And the question is that at the level of the world, they destroyed the economy of many millions of people, the poor people. And these people are dying already of hunger, of many curable diseases, of the terrible situation in which they are now, as a consequence of the public policy, as a consequence of a very specific decisions of the governments and the corporations. And they have, in a very real sense, Brian, for us, the question today is not so much to discuss what is the best public policy for COVID, because what was all right a year ago today has no meaning. What we need to do today is how at least half of the people on Earth will survive. It's a question of survival. How we will reinvent ourselves to survive, because we are almost doomed, Brian. To put this in very serious terms, many thousands were living in the city of Oaxaca that you know from tourists. It is not only the employees in restaurants and hotels, but thousands of people selling handicrafts or producing some services or whatever for the tourists. And we have no tourists now, or a very limited number in just in December. And then they cannot find jobs of any kind of things. They don't have basically no support from the government. We don't have unemployment insurance. We don't have even the amount of money people in the US are getting if they lost their jobs. They are not having that kind of support. There are some social programs giving them a very, very small amount of money that is not enough to live. And then they are dying here in the city of Oaxaca, dying of hunger. Our organization is not enough people's organization. We have created bodies to give them some food. And of course, this is happening everywhere. But this is happening in different conditions. I have seen, I don't know if you have seen these spectacular photos, particularly in places like Texas, in which you have a road of 10 lines full of cars, and all of them going for free food. And then people are going in a car to get free food. That is a paradox. That is almost a contradiction. But that is happening everywhere. That means that this is happening everywhere. People are not having money to buy food. And this is creating a real disaster. This is the world we are living today. And this is what I'm trying to share with you is that for us, in our condition, what we are looking for is how we will survive in this world. And in this world, COVID is not so important. There are many, many things more important than COVID to deal with. And of course, in the communities, the situation is entirely different.
So let's say the economic elite and the politicians that are imposing the lockdown and the current state of existence that we're in, is the end game to further oppress and eliminate those in poverty and those that are disabled? What do you see as the end game of this
This
lockdown?
is clearly part of the game for 25 years, meaning in the last 25 years, a new class of people was created, that is disposable humans. In the past, in the history of capitalism, they have use for everyone. And those without a job were playing a function for capitalism. They were the Industrial Reserve Army, and they were very effective in playing that function for capitalism. But in the 90s, there were this conviction that most people on earth will have no use for capital any longer,
Because of automation, robotics.
and many, many different kind of things. Have we discussed it in our conversations, Brian, this meeting in the Fairmont Hotel in 1995?
I don't think so.
It was a meeting with the most important, 500 most powerful people on earth, politically or economically. It
Is it?
was Bush and Gorbachev and Bill Gates and these kind of people. It was the meeting to discuss the state of the world. It was before Davos, before this
I was going
meeting.
to say Davos. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that was before that. And then they had this meeting, and the main theme of the meeting about the state of the world was what we will do with 80% of the people, that we will not need them any longer. We will need only for production 20% of the people. And then this 80% can become a problem for us because we will not hire them, we will not give them any job or opportunities, and then they will create problem for us. What can we do with them? And then when this guy, Zbigniew Brzezinski, you can find this in Wikipedia. This is not mystery, it's not secret, it's not conspiracy theory. It is something that happened, that has been reported. Then he coined the word, this is the word that you need to look for, tititainment. And what they said is we will give to these people tits, the expression for women giving the tits for the babies. That was a very vulgar expression of giving the basic food, the basic elements of survival to these people, and entertainment. That is the meaning of the word tititainment. Then basic food.
You're saying, are you saying titty-tainment?
Yes.
Okay. At first, I wasn't sure what you said, and I'm like, okay. And then you were explaining it, and I was like, okay, you're saying titty, and now you said titty-tainment, like
Tititainment.
like titties and entertainment.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And if you see the world, Brian, this is exactly what they have been doing. And you have many, many young people today that what they have in the world is tits and entertainment. And they plug it into their cellular and seeing videos of every kind and fascinated with the most stupid things that is entertainment for them. Entertainment of any kind, usually very poor kind of entertainment, but they are entertained with this. And then now let me say something worse, Brian.
Worse than titty-tainment?
Yes, because
Okay.
after 2008, because of the so-called crisis of 2008, because of the kind of predicament in which they were, because that is the predicament of their own system, the system is collapsing, is at the very end. And then they changed the policy. Then it is not only tits and entertainment for these disposable human beings, but they are disposing of these human beings. And meaning they have decided that they should not be in this place any longer. And then you have these stories. Even you have a very famous film now, Inferno, you know, of this guy. The story, the book is Dan Brown. The book is called Inferno, and this is the whole story of a guy, a very rich guy, very very rich guy, that is also a scientist, and then he creates something to eliminate half the people on Earth, because they say that if they don't do that, the human species will collapse in a few years more. Then to save the human species, they need to dispose of, to kill many people on Earth, because we have something that they call overpopulation, surplus population. They have too many people on Earth, and then many people should die. And you have this guy that very everybody knows him, Bill Gates, that in an article, he wrote an article saying that it would be very good for humanity if 15% of the people on Earth died. That means a
Is
billion
that
people.
15 or 50?
15,
Okay.
15. That is a billion people. Not half the people on Earth, but 15%.
Okay.
That is a billion people. But it is, let 1 billion people die, Brian. That is the thing. And in a very real sense, Brian, they are letting 1 billion people at least to die. If it were for them, they are dooming. I am talking corporations and governments dooming at least 1 billion people to death.
And what are they going to do after the 15% of us are gone?
Excuse me?
What is the plan after those 15% are gone?
Well, apparently, they assume that there will be enough food for the people and not enough natural resources to continue the exploitation of the sources. They may come back to the situation of 80-20 or even to the situation before 80-20. They have many options. When a mode of production, capitalism, has been transformed into a mode of dispossession. What these corporations are doing is dispossessing people of everything. It's no longer based, capitalism was based since the time of Adam Smith in making people produce and then getting a profit from the production of these people. Now this is no longer the case. They are dispossessing people of what the people have, rights, goods, soil, water, whatever, and accumulating in less and less hands. You know all the figures that a few people owns more than half of the people on Earth. a few hundreds owns more than half the people on earth. And they are accumulating more and more people. You have all the obscene figures about how much money these billionaires earned because of COVID. That COVID becomes fantastic business for a few. Fantastic business. Uh, then they are accumulating more and more money, not necessarily capital. They are not hiring people with that money. They're not transforming that money into capital. They are just accumulating money and accumulating areas, real estate, soil, water, everything. What is the purpose? Just to accumulate more money.
Now, what do we do? I mean, I think the thing that I'm thinking about is how do we get past this divisiveness? How do we get past the the fact that we can't talk to each other? I mean, social media is a really good example of it being, everybody's worldviews being weaponized, and
Yes.
people are, creating very clear battle lines between each other, friends and neighbors, people, you know, um, uh,
The most difficult thing, Brian, really difficult, is that we need to learn to listen. I can tell you 1,000 stories about how the people are reinventing themselves to survive in the US, in California, in New York, or in Oaxaca. But people know how to survive in these conditions. But not even poor people know how to listen. And Comandante Tacho said once that to listen is not just to hear the other person, but to be ready to be transformed by the other person. And this is terrible. But to say this, Brian, is terrible. We need to how we will listen to all the racist people that are today circulating in the US.
that's a scary fucking thought, to listen to, a Nazi or a fascist, and to be think, well, how am I going to be transformed by them?
Yes, and then what we need to understand, and this is particularly important in the United States. You have a story of violence since the day you were born. From the very beginning, you were violent. From the very beginning, you were discriminated against. From the very beginning, you were oppressing people. And that means that very decent people, very people that can be your friends, were also racist. I have a friend in Cincinnati that have been telling me, almost crying. He works in the area of business and in finance, etc. And then he said, really almost crying. Now today, suddenly, in this time of Trump, I am having dinner with a friend of 20 years, and suddenly he started saying some things, meaning that he is really a racist. And he begins to say, oh, I am so happy of being white. And he begins to have this kind of conversation and saying, and it was hidden because it was not politically correct. And now it is not only politically correct, but is the position to take in public, and to say this in public. And then we need to understand them. This is the only way to deal with this, Brian, is not to buy weapons and to fight with them. Yes, they are armed, that they will use their weapons to impose their will. Then we need to talk with them and to understand their fear, for example. There are many, many different reasons, but one of the reasons is fear. This was created in the last 10 years. You can read a lot about this in internet, etc. How this fear was created in the last 10 years. there was the discussion for more than 10 years that the white people will become a minority at a certain point in the following decades. And then some people started to say, once we become a minority, we the white people, they, the brown people, they, the black people, will oppress us as we did with them. And then they are afraid that they, the brown and black people, will treat them as they treated them in the past. And there is another argument. For example, do you know something about Charlottesville?
Say that one more time.
Charlottesville?
Oh, Charlottesville?
Yes.
Are you talking about the massacre in the church?
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the points it is in the I don't know how to say the pancards, the signs they were carrying. Some of the signs were saying the Jews will not succeed in imposing us the domination of the brown people. And this has been going for 200 years. There is an anti-Semitism at the very at the bottom of this for 200 years in America. That means that the Jews have a plot to bring brown people to America, and then once the brown people are the majority, then they, the Jews, will be able to manipulate white and brown for their own benefit. And you have all these stories against the Jews, and that the predominance of the Jews, the control of the Jews of the business of Wall Street, etc., and how they will manipulate everyone once they have the domination of the browns and the blacks over the whites. You have many of these stories. And then you can say, how I will discuss with someone like that. Well, the question is, try to understand. Listen is try to understand why is these people saying these stupid, horrible things. Because for many people, apparently, this violence, it comes from fear. They are afraid of what will happen to them. And this was something exploited by Trump in a very smart way. He was exploiting the fear of the people. The
How do you?
fear, yeah,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
the fear of poor people, rich people, middle class, everyone. That was.
How do you transform fear into trust and love?
We have one very important campaign after a few weeks or months of discussing the pandemic. We started a campaign. It's called From Fear to Hope, because fear was created in thousands of people around us. You know that very well. And there was real fear, and then how we can transform that fear into hope. And that means creating space, creating conditions for doing the right thing. Against hope is not the same as expectation. We have been educated in expectation. If you do A, B, C, then you will produce D. Basically, expectation is that people, us men and women, can do something and produce certain impact in their reality and then get what they want. We have been educated about that. We have been told, if you study and you get a diploma, and then you will have a brilliant future.
We know that's bullshit.
Yes, but millions of people believe that. And
I did. I mean, I worked on 2 master's degrees, and I have nothing.
Yes, that is the case. And you have many poor people fighting and doing an incredible amount of sacrifice for their children to get a diploma. And you have many millions doing that. And apparently the facts are with them, because if you see the level of income of those with diploma in the US and the level of income of those without diploma, you have a proof that the diploma is useful. We don't need to
And it's interesting because Steve Jobs quit school.
Yes.
Mark Zuckerberg, who created Facebook, quit Harvard.
Yes.
I think Bill Gates did as well. He quit school.
Yes.
All of the billionaires pretty much quit school.
Yes, they know.
Yeah.
They were smart enough to know that that was not the right path to do something, the kind of things that they wanted to do. Then, well, the question is that we need to discover the motives, the conditions that created that horrible mentality, instead of rejecting that mentality and saying, I don't want to have nothing with them. I will hate them in the way they are hating me. No, that is not, that is to abandon that game. I think, Brian, that should be our next conversation. What to do? First, to listen, and how to deal with this polarization of our societies. That is very dangerous. That is the real danger, a lot more than the virus. The discussion should be what to do with the destruction of the world that we had. It's no longer there. Not the climate, not the economy, not the society we have. We have a new situation, a radically new situation. How to deal with it? How to reinvent ourselves in that new world? And second, how to deal with the polarization? How to find ways to listen to the other? And we know a lot about that, Brian, because it is finally recognized that the otherness of the other. And we were always the other discriminated, oppressed, etc., and not recognized as another. We were all the same. And now finally, we recognize that there are different kind of otherness. And then we know how to deal with the otherness of the other. And this is what we are learning from indigenous people and other people, how to deal with the otherness of the other. The otherness of the other can be a brown skin, or can be a violent fascism inside the heart.
And it reminds me of what the Zapatistas said, to create a world where many worlds are embraced.
Exactly. That is the point. That is the theme of our next conversation.
Now, I want to reiterate, because I think it's critical, the idea of listening deeply, but being open to being transformed by the person that you're listening to.
Yes.
That's intense. I mean, especially if the worldviews are completely opposite.
Yes. And then it is how to find a space of consensus, a place where you can agree with something. And then you start with that space of agreement to construct something. As we started today, we started with a solid agreement. This is real. This is not an invention. The virus is a real threat. It's a real, it's something that we need to deal with. We are not discussing that. We are not denying. We are not deniers. We are not in that position. And that is a point of departure. And then we can have a conversation. Brian, I need to go in a minute.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I love you very much. And Is there anything you'd like to share in closing? Is there any projects that you're working on or websites or anything like that that you would like to share with us before
Yes,
we
I would
depart?
like to say that in spite of the terrible situation, is one of the worst moments in the history of humankind. It's a very serious, very dangerous moment. I am full of hope. What I am seeing, what I am experiencing every day is the amazing creativity of millions and millions of people around the world doing fantastic things. I am very, very impressed, Brian. It is not one doctrine, it's one position, it's not one line. It's billions of people doing something fantastic.
Can I ask you one question before you depart? The
Yes.
question is, what I'm hearing a lot, even from friends, that they say "fuck hope," or even though they're doing the work. For example, a friend of mine was saying, we've been so traumatized. Hope is too disappointing. What do you say to those that are listening that don't believe in hope, but
One
are
of the
trying to
most
do the right thing?
I am one of the things I am saying that sometimes hope is mixed with expectation. And expectation is this: if I am doing A, B, C, then I will produce D, and they are frustrated because D never comes. They do A, B, C, and then D never comes, and then fucking with hope because you are not, and they fucking with expectation. Then I am adopting more and more the notion of hope of Václav Havel, that is, hope is not the conviction that something will happen, but the conviction that something makes sense whatever happens. And the perfect image for this is the campesino, the peasant, that the day he puts the seed in the soil, because this is the day to put the seed in the soil, he has the hope that they will have a crop, but he does not know if the weather will be the right weather or not. He has not the conviction, he has not the expectation. I will have my crop of corn, because many things can happen. But today, what makes sense is to put the seed in the soil. This is what is needed to do today, to put the seed in the soil. Because if I don't do that, I will never have a crop. Yes, I know that my seed in the soil may produce a crop or not. I know I am not. You know, have you heard about this guy Edgar Morin?
The name, yeah, I'm not sure.
Morin, Morin in French.
Okay.
Um, he will be 100 years old next July 8th. Um, he is now a wise man of 100 years old. And just 2 weeks ago, in a very interesting interview, he said, we need to learn how to live with uncertainty. We were living trapped in statistics and projections and different kind of games, ready to believe that things will happen in a certain way. Even the crisis was exploding before our nose, but we were not seeing the crisis. We were not seeing the world falling apart. We were seeing all the statistics and all the different kind of announcements of normality and how the world will we have prosperity, etc. Then we need to live with radical uncertainty, he said. This is recovering sense, recovering meaning in your life, because we don't know, we know nothing about the future. We know that the future does not exist. It's the only thing that we know for sure. It has no existence, and we don't know if it will exist for us, for any of us. Then it's recover our condition, our human conditions. We don't know what will happen, have no idea of what will happen. Then hope is not a plan saying, I will do this and this and this, and then I will produce this outcome. Hope is to do the right things right now, to do what makes sense, what has a meaning. this is again something that we can discuss in our next conversation.
Excellent.
Hope and these other things.
Thank you so much, my dear friend. I deeply grateful for this conversation, and I love you very much. So everybody stay tuned for the next episode with Gustavo Esteva. And thank you so much. And now we're going to have an awkward ending. So you can find the Blind Man in Black at blindmaninblack.com and Apple Podcast and the YouTube channel Blind Man in Black. Thank you, Gustavo. Take care, my dear friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stay healthy and safe.
I will try. Yes. Bye.
Bye.